I appreciate the opportunity. My name is Matt Janino. I'm joining you today from my home office because I've got a sick kiddo, but we are typically located out of our Portsmouth office here in the Seacoast. I serve as the Executive Director of EFAC, which stands for Education for All Children. We're a education to employment program that we deploy in Kenya. It's a really interesting, innovative, and impactful model I'll tell you a little bit about, and then I'll tell you a little bit about why we do the work and why we do it in that part of the world, and then some of the projects that I think we might be having in the near future that you might be able to participate in. So the problem, so just to give a quick overview, only 40% of kids continue their education after 8th grade in Kenya, and they live typically on about $2 a day. Public funding for education in Kenya ends at grade 8, and only about 11% of young people in Kenya graduate from high school and go on to college. So these are really kind of staggering metrics when you think about comparing that to certainly the US and other Western countries. We focus particularly on Kenya for a few reasons. One is, in general, by 2050, 86% of the world's poor will live in sub-Saharan Africa, and 67% of those individuals will be under the age of 25. So this is a particularly vulnerable part of our world, and where there's great need, not only today, but for years to come. Kenya is also uniquely positioned for having a really strong network of private high schools. They're essentially boarding schools in that students live there. So with public funding of education ending in grade 8, a new market of schools kind of started up for those families, those rare families that can afford them. So there's a decent network of schools. And given its relatively stable democracy and developing infrastructure, Kenya's success has larger implications for the entire region. And then lastly, in terms of why Kenya, our co-founders, Nancy and Rod Van Sciver, who founded EFAC in 2008, have strong personal and professional connections to the region. And they really, the impetus and the genesis for all this is them really wanting to figure out how to effectively help. So the solution that they came up with was kind of underpinned by the principle that education is the most effective tool for economic mobility, particularly in developing nations. So since 2008, EFAC has developed and delivered an education to employment model that's been proven to break the cycle of poverty. And we do this by doing several things. One is we support the brightest and poorest kids in Kenya with scholarships so that they have access to those high schools that I was talking about earlier. Second is that EFAC provides continued what I call wraparound supports in supporting the entire student that ensures their success in high school, through college, and onto a career. And these services include core programming, workshops, and training around personal development and leadership training, health and wellness supports, and career preparation, including mentorship, access to internships, and job market preparation. Two other things I'll just mention quickly about EFAC that also makes us unique. All of our programmatic decision-making and strategy is driven by the local staff and board in Nairobi. So even though we have an office here in Portsmouth, it is a really Kenya-first and a Kenya-driven model. And the other thing that I will say is because there's significant disparities between the number of girls that go on to attend high school and college and career, we focus 2/3 of our energies and our resources on girls. So it's a 2/3 to 1/3 girls to boy ratio to help offset that disparity that exists there. And that's often because of many things. And it sounds like some of these things you guys have already probably learned about. Increased focus on domestic responsibilities, early marriage and motherhood, and in some cultures and families, girls being looked at as property and not necessarily as people, not as nearly as much as we might like. So given that, an overview of the problem in Kenya and EFAC's approach to solving it, there are opportunities for working with us, and I mentioned a few of them here in the slide. We have a growing interest in increasing the awareness of EFAC in the local market. One of the things that we're really focusing on right now are career and employment outcomes, making sure that all this work that we do with students from grade 9 through grade 16 produces economic results that that manifest in the form of jobs or entrepreneurship and other things. So creating greater awareness around EFAC is going to create greater awareness of EFAC students and their marketability in a very competitive job market where unemployment rates are extremely high. So that's one thing that that I was considering. Second is that we have a network of high schools that do two things with EFAC. One is they're engaged in a cultural exchange program with many of our students that we work with in Kenya. And they also help from a fundraising standpoint. They do local fundraisers to help to support the organization. So I'm very interested in learning more about the effectiveness of that program, and I'd be very curious to know what kinds of changes and improvements we might be able to make in the future for that. And then lastly, development research. We're growing our network of partners, particularly in the employment space in Kenya, and that takes time and research and relationship building. Having an intern supporting some of the research that would go into developing that network would be really helpful as we move forward to try to help our students, the students that are graduating, move on to fulfilling and sustaining careers. I've got my contact information on the slide as well. If anyone wants to reach out to me directly, they're welcome to. Happy to answer any questions that you have.